In the winter of 1740, as snow blanketed the palaces of Berlin, a young king sat by candlelight, his quill trembling over paper that could destroy him. The words he was writing were not military dispatches or royal decrees. They were love letters, explicit, passionate, and addressed to men. These letters, discovered centuries later in the secret archives of European courts, would reveal one of history's most closely guarded royal secrets. Frederick II of Prussia, known to the world as Frederick the Great, was not just a military genius who challenged the greatest empires of his age. He was a man whose heart belonged to other men, in a world where such love was punishable by death. Behind the crown, the victories, and the philosophical treatises lay a tortured soul who spent his entire life hiding the most fundamental truth about himself. The evidence sits today in carefully guarded archives. Letters written in French to Italian poet Francesco Algarotti, filled with romantic yearning that no amount of royal protocol could disguise. Diplomatic reports from foreign courts whispered about the Prussian king's peculiar attachments to beautiful young men. Court records document his passionate friendship with Hans Hermann von Katte, a relationship so intense it would lead to tragedy that haunted Frederick for the rest of his life. If you're ready to uncover one of history's most forbidden royal love stories, make sure to subscribe, because what you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about one of Europe's most powerful kings. Frederick's letters to Algarotti, preserved in the Venetian state archives, burn with an intensity that transcends mere friendship. "I count the days, I count the hours," he wrote to the young Italian, "since you left me. Historians have long debated the nature of these relationships, but the language Frederick used, passionate, intimate, desperate, suggests connections that went far beyond political alliances or intellectual discourse. What makes Frederick's story so extraordinary is not just that he loved men, but that he did so while commanding one of Europe's most powerful armies, ruling a kingdom built on military might and traditional values. Every public appearance was a performance. Every royal duty was a prison. Every day, he lived with the knowledge that discovery would mean not just his own destruction, but the collapse of the Prussia he had built. The young prince who would become Frederick the Great learned early that love was dangerous. Born into a court where his father valued only soldiers and strength, Frederick's gentle nature and intellectual curiosity were seen as weaknesses to be crushed. But some secrets are too powerful to kill, and soon, that secret would explode in the most devastating way possible, when Frederick's first love would pay the ultimate price for their forbidden connection. The sound of marching boots echoed through the corridors of the royal palace in Berlin every morning at dawn. For most Prussian princes, this was the music of destiny, the rhythm that would shape them into warriors. But for young Frederick, it was the sound of a prison door slamming shut. Born in 1712, into the iron grip of his father, Frederick William I, the future king would spend his childhood caught between two worlds, the brutal military machine his father worshipped, and the world of art, music, and literature that called to his soul. Frederick William the Fan was known throughout Europe as the Soldier King, a man who transformed Prussia into a military powerhouse through sheer force of will and an obsession with discipline that bordered on madness. According to contemporary court records, he expected his son to embody these same values from the moment the boy could walk. But Frederick was different. Where his father saw strength in conformity, Frederick found beauty in rebellion. Where his father demanded obedience, Frederick asked questions. The earliest signs of trouble appeared when Frederick was barely 7 years old. Palace servants reported to the king that his son preferred reading French poetry to practicing sword work. The boy showed an unusual interest in music, philosophy, and the company of his tutors rather than military exercises. Historians suggest that even at this young age, Frederick was unconsciously seeking refuge in intellectual pursuits, a pattern that would define his entire approach to surviving in a world that demanded he be someone he fundamentally was not. Frederick William's reaction was swift and brutal. Court documents from the period reveal a systematic campaign to crush what the king saw as his son's effeminate tendencies. The boy was forbidden to read anything but military manuals. His beloved French tutor was dismissed. His flute, The one possession that brought him joy was confiscated and reportedly burned in front of him. According to letters written by courtiers, the king would fly into violent rages whenever he caught Frederick displaying interest in art or literature. Some scholars believe this early oppression shaped not just Frederick's intellectual development, but his understanding of love and attraction. In a court where sensitivity was seen as weakness, where artistic expression was punished as deviance, Frederick learned that his natural inclinations, whether toward poetry or toward the young men who shared his interests, were dangerous secrets that must be hidden at all costs. The psychological weight of this constant surveillance and correction cannot be understated. Frederick lived under the watchful eyes of military instructors who reported his every move to the king. He was forced to participate in dawn military drills, afternoon weapons training, and evening strategy sessions. But witnesses noted that even during these forced activities, the prince's eyes would wander to the books lining his father's study, or to the young officers whose grace and intelligence set them apart from the brutal soldiers his father preferred. By adolescence, Frederick had learned to wear a mask so convincing that even his father began to believe the performance. But beneath that carefully constructed facade, a different kind of rebellion was brewing, one that would soon lead him to the most dangerous decision of his young life. Because Frederick was about to meet someone who would understand his secret world, and that meeting would nearly destroy them both. In the summer of 1728, a young officer arrived at the Prussian court whose presence would change Frederick's life forever. Hans Hermann von Katte was everything Frederick had been forbidden to become: cultured, refined, fluent in French literature, and possessed of a quick wit that could match the prince's own. According to court records, Katte was assigned as Frederick's companion during military exercises, but their connection transcended any official duties. Within weeks, palace observers noted an unusual intimacy between the 16-year-old prince and the 26-year-old officer. Contemporary accounts described their relationship in language that suggests something far deeper than friendship. Frederick's personal secretary wrote in cipher that the prince showed particular attachment to Katte, spending hours in private conversation and exchanging what appeared to be personal correspondence. Diplomatic reports from the period mention whispered concerns about the excessive familiarity between the two men. While historians debate the exact nature of their relationship, the documented evidence points to a bond so intense it would ultimately prove fatal. Katte understood Frederick's hidden world in ways no one else could. He shared the prince's love of literature and philosophy, often smuggling banned French books into Frederick's chambers. According to surviving letters, Katte encouraged Frederick's artistic pursuits and provided the intellectual companionship the young prince had been desperately seeking. Some scholars suggest that Katte may have been Frederick's first experience of romantic love, a connection that felt both liberating and terrifying in the suffocating atmosphere of the Prussian court. But their relationship existed under constant surveillance. Frederick William I, already suspicious of his son's unmanly interests, began monitoring their interactions more closely. Court informants reported every private meeting, every shared joke, every moment that seemed to exceed proper military protocol. The king's growing paranoia about Frederick's associations would soon explode into something far more dangerous than either young man could have anticipated. By 1730, the pressure had become unbearable. Frederick, now 18, felt trapped between his father's impossible expectations and his own desperate need for freedom. It was then that he and Katte hatched a plan so reckless it could only have been born from young love and absolute desperation. They would flee Prussia together. Historical records show they contacted the British ambassador, hoping to escape to England, where Frederick's uncle, King George II, might offer protection. The plan was elaborate and carefully coordinated. Frederick would slip away during a royal tour near the border, while Katte would create a diversion and join him later. They gathered supplies, secured horses, and prepared for a journey that would either grant them freedom or destroy them completely. According to contemporary accounts, they were driven not just by political ambition, but by the dream of a life where they could exist without hiding who they truly were. But in a court built on spies and suspicion, even the most carefully guarded secrets have a way of surfacing. And when Frederick William the I discovered what his son had attempted, his rage would demand a punishment so brutal that it would haunt Frederick for the rest of his life. Because sometimes the price of forbidden love is paid not by the lovers, but by the one who dares to love first. The escape attempt failed catastrophically. Frederick and Katte were captured at the border, dragged back in chains to face Frederick William I's volcanic fury. But the king's punishment would exceed even Frederick's darkest fears. On November 6, 1730, 18-year-old Frederick was forced to watch from his prison window as Hans Hermann von Katte was beheaded in the courtyard below. According to eyewitness accounts, Katte's final words were, "My dear Frederick, forgive me," and Frederick reportedly collapsed, screaming as the axe fell. The execution broke something fundamental in Frederick's spirit. Court physicians documented that he refused food for days, spoke to no one, and seemed to retreat into himself completely. But Frederick William I wasn't finished. He had learned enough about his son's unnatural attachments to devise a punishment more cruel than death. Frederick would be forced to marry, to perform heterosexual royal duty, and to produce heirs for the Prussian throne. In 1733, 21-year-old Frederick found himself standing at the altar beside Elizabeth Christine of Brunswick-Beven, a gentle, devout young woman who had no idea she was about to become part of an elaborate royal deception. The marriage, arranged entirely by Frederick William I, was designed to cure his son's supposed deviance and secure the dynasty's future. Contemporary diplomatic reports describe the wedding as magnificent, but observers noted the groom's unusual detachment throughout the ceremony. From the beginning, the marriage was a carefully orchestrated performance. Frederick treated Elizabeth with courtesy and respect, but historians have found no evidence of genuine romantic or physical intimacy between them. Their separate apartments in the palace were connected by a formal receiving room where they conducted their public interactions. But private letters suggest they rarely spent time alone together. Elizabeth Christine would later confide to her ladies-in-waiting that her husband seemed more comfortable discussing philosophy and literature than any personal matters. Tell me in the comments, what part of this story shocks you the most so far? And if you're enjoying this documentary, make sure to subscribe for more stories like this. The facade required constant maintenance. Frederick learned to escort his wife to public functions, to dance with her at court balls, and to present the image of a devoted royal husband. But palace servants reported that he often spent entire nights in his study, writing letters in French to mail correspondence across Europe. Some scholars suggest that this period marked the beginning of Frederick's lifelong pattern of using intellectual correspondence as an outlet for the emotional connections he could no longer pursue openly. Elizabeth Christine, according to her surviving letters to relatives, seemed to understand that something was deeply wrong, but couldn't identify the source of her husband's emotional distance. She wrote of feeling like a decoration in his life, rather than a true partner. The couple would never have children, and after Frederick became king, they would live essentially separate lives while maintaining the public pretense of marriage. The psychological toll of this enforced heterosexuality was documented by court observers who noted Frederick's increasing reliance on alcohol and his growing cynicism about human relationships in general. He had learned that love was dangerous, that intimacy led to death, and that his only safety lay in emotional isolation. But isolation has its own dangers, and soon Frederick would discover that even a king could not entirely escape the hunger for genuine human connection. In 1740, Frederick William I died, and his tortured son ascended the Prussian throne as Frederick II. But kingship brought not freedom, but an even more elaborate prison. Now every letter Frederick wrote could be intercepted, every friendship scrutinized, every private moment dissected by foreign diplomats hunting for weakness. It was in this suffocating environment that Frederick began developing what historians now recognize as one of the most sophisticated systems of coded emotional correspondence in royal history. The key to understanding Frederick's hidden life lies in the letters he exchanged with Francesco Algarotti, a brilliant Italian poet and philosopher who arrived at the Prussian court in 1740. Preserved in the Venetian state archives, these letters reveal a relationship that transcended typical royal patronage. Frederick wrote to Algarotti with an intensity that shocked even the sophisticated European intellectuals of his time. "You are the most amiable of mortals," Frederick penned in one letter, "and I would give my life to possess your friendship." But it was the language Frederick used that betrayed his deeper feelings. 18th century aristocratic correspondence had established conventions for expressing affection between men. But Frederick's letters to Algarotti pushed far beyond those boundaries. He wrote of burning with desire to see the Italian again, of feeling consumed by Algarotti's. Modern scholars analyzing the correspondence that Frederick employed the same passionate vocabulary, typically reserved for heterosexual. The coded nature becomes clear when examining Frederick's of classical mythology and literature. When writing about his feelings for Algarotti, Frederick frequently referenced the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus, Apollo and Hyacinthus, mythological pairs that educated Europeans understood as symbols of same-sex love. According to experts in 18th century correspondence, this was a common method for gay men to communicate their true feelings while maintaining plausible deniability. Frederick's intellectual pursuits during this period served a dual purpose. They provided legitimate cover for his extensive correspondence with men across Europe, while also offering emotional refuge from the isolation of his position. Palace records show that he maintained regular correspondence with Voltaire, Jean-Baptiste d'Argens, and dozens of other male intellectuals. Some historians suggest that these relationships allowed Frederick to experience intimacy and emotional connection in the only form available to him. Through the exchange of ideas, philosophical debates, and literary discussions. The pattern of Frederick's correspondence reveals a man desperately seeking connection while terrified of discovery. Letters to his male friends were often written late at night, sometimes in cipher, and frequently destroyed after reading. Contemporary accounts from palace servants describe the king working by candlelight until dawn, filling page after page with what they assumed were state documents, but which modern historians believe were often personal letters to his network of male correspondents. But even these carefully guarded intellectual relationships carried enormous risk. European courts were already whispering about the Prussian king's unusual bachelor lifestyle and his preference for male company. And soon, those whispers would force Frederick to make a choice between the connections he craved and the throne he was born to protect. Because in the deadly game of 18th century diplomacy, even a king's private letters could become weapons of war. With the crown secure on his head and his father's oppressive presence finally silenced, Frederick II embarked on a remarkable project: the creation of a private world where he could surround himself with the kind of men who understood his hidden nature. In 1745, he began construction of Sanssouci Palace, a Rococo masterpiece outside Potsdam that would serve as both his summer residence and his emotional sanctuary. But Sanssouci was more than just another royal palace. It was Frederick's attempt to build a space where intellect, beauty, and male companionship could flourish away from the prying eyes of his court. Frederick's vision for Sanssouci was revolutionary for its time. Unlike traditional royal residences designed for massive court gatherings, this palace was intimate, designed for small circles of carefully chosen guests. Court records show that Frederick personally oversaw every detail of the design, insisting on private apartments connected by discreet corridors, library spaces for intimate conversations, and gardens perfect for long walks with selected companions. The palace's very architecture seemed designed to facilitate the kind of close male friendships that had been so brutally punished in his youth. The men Frederick invited to join his inner circle at Sanssouci read like a catalogue of 18th century Europe's most brilliant minds. Voltaire arrived in 1750, beginning a complex relationship that combined intellectual collaboration with what contemporary observers described as unusually intense personal attachment. Jean-Baptiste d'Argens, a French philosopher and wit, became one of Frederick's most trusted confidants. Count Francesco Algarotti continued his correspondence from Italy, visiting when possible. These were all men who shared Frederick's love of literature, philosophy, and the kind of sophisticated conversation that had been forbidden in his father's militaristic court. But historians have noted patterns in Frederick's friendships that suggest deeper motivations beyond mere intellectual compatibility. The king showed particular favoritism toward young, handsome men of talent. Palace servants reported that Frederick would often spend hours in private conversation with these companions, walking in his gardens at dawn or sitting by the fire late into the night. Diplomatic reports from visiting ambassadors noted the unusual intimacy of these relationships, describing scenes that seemed to exceed normal royal patronage. The atmosphere at Sanssouci was deliberately constructed to encourage emotional openness. Frederick instituted daily philosophical discussions, staged private theatrical performances, and created an environment where men could express sensitivity and artistic appreciation without fear of being labeled weak or effeminate. According to surviving accounts, the conversations at Sanssouci's dinner table ranged from classical poetry to contemporary literature, from military strategy to personal philosophy, topics that allowed Frederick and his companions to explore ideas about love, beauty, and human connection in ways that would have been impossible in more formal settings. Yet even this carefully constructed sanctuary carried its own dangers. European diplomats regularly reported on the king's unusual household arrangements, and enemy powers began crafting propaganda that hinted at Frederick's irregular personal life. Voltaire himself, during a bitter falling out with the king, would later make cutting remarks about Frederick's peculiar tastes that scandalized European intellectual circles. Frederick had built himself a paradise, but paradise always comes with a price. And soon, the outside world would intrude on his carefully constructed refuge in the most devastating way possible. The 7 Years' War began in 1756, and for Frederick II, it became something far more complex than a struggle for territorial control. As Prussian armies marched across European battlefields, the king, who had spent decades hiding his true nature, found in warfare an unexpected form of liberation. On the battlefield, there were no whispered court rumors, no diplomatic reports about his peculiar friendships, no pressure to perform heterosexual royal duty. There was only strategy, survival, and the brutal clarity of life and death. Contemporary military records reveal that Frederick threw himself into campaign life with an intensity that surprised even his most experienced generals. He would spend months away from Berlin, living in military camps, sharing the hardships of his soldiers, and immersing himself completely in the masculine world of warfare. According to surviving letters from his officers, the king seemed more comfortable in a military tent surrounded by his commanders than he ever appeared in the gilded halls of his palaces. But historians suggest that Frederick's relationship with war was deeply psychological. The constant threat of death, the need for absolute focus, and the masculine camaraderie of military life provided him with the kind of emotional refuge he had been seeking his entire life. In camp, surrounded by loyal officers, Frederick could experience intense male bonds without the sexual suspicion that haunted his civilian relationships. Military brotherhood offered him a socially acceptable form of love between men. The campaigns also served as escape from the suffocating expectations of royal marriage and dynasty building. Palace records show that Frederick used military necessity as justification for spending increasingly long periods away from his wife, Elizabeth Christine. His secretaries documented that he would extend campaigns beyond military requirements, sometimes remaining in the field for months after decisive victories had been achieved. Some scholars interpret this as Frederick using warfare to avoid the domestic life that had become unbearable to him. Yet the psychological toll of this dual existence, public military hero, private emotional exile, was enormous. Officers who served with Frederick during the 7 Years' War reported dramatic changes in his personality. The witty, sophisticated king of Sanssouci became increasingly cynical, prone to dark moods, and obsessed with death. His letters from this period, preserved in the Prussian state archives, reveal a man struggling with what modern psychologists might recognize as severe depression. The most revealing insight into Frederick's psychological state comes from his own writings during the war years. In private correspondence with his nephew, he wrote about feeling tired of being Frederick, suggesting a profound disconnection from his own identity. Military historians note that Frederick began taking increasingly reckless personal risks on the battlefield, leading charges that more cautious commanders avoided, as if he were testing fate itself. War had become Frederick's drug, a way to escape the prison of his own life while simultaneously fulfilling his royal obligations. But even the chaos of battle couldn't silence the whispers that were growing louder in European courts. And soon, those whispers would crystallize into accusations that would force Frederick to confront the most dangerous threat to his reign. Because sometimes, the enemies within your own court are far more deadly than any army you face in the field. By the 1760s, the gossip surrounding Frederick II had evolved from court whispers into diplomatic intelligence. European capitals buzzed with reports about the Prussian king's unusual domestic arrangements, his preference for male company, and his increasingly obvious avoidance of his wife. What had once been private speculation was becoming public knowledge among the continent's ruling classes, and Frederick's enemies began to weaponize his sexuality as a tool of political warfare. The most damning evidence comes from diplomatic correspondence preserved in the French Foreign Ministry archives. Ambassador reports from Berlin described Frederick's household in terms that left little doubt about their suspicions. One French diplomat wrote to Versailles about the king's singular attachments and his habit of surrounding himself with beautiful young men of talent. Austrian intelligence reports noted that Frederick's marriage remained childless after more than 30 years, while the king continued to live essentially separately from his wife. Russian Empress Catherine II, herself no stranger to unconventional relationships, reportedly made cutting remarks about Frederick's peculiar tastes in letters to her correspondents. According to surviving diplomatic records, she once observed that the Prussian king preferred the company of philosophers to that of women, a comment that would have been understood by educated Europeans as a veiled reference to homosexuality. The fact that such observations were being made by fellow monarchs indicates how widespread the rumors had become. The most dangerous threat came from Austria, Prussia's traditional enemy. Habsburg diplomatic channels began circulating stories designed to undermine Frederick's legitimacy by questioning his masculinity and fitness to rule. Some historians suggest that Austrian agents deliberately spread exaggerated tales about Frederick's relationships, knowing that sexual scandal could be more damaging to a king's reputation than military defeat. These rumors reached their peak during the 7 Years' War, when Austria's propaganda machine portrayed Frederick as a degenerate whose unnatural behavior made him unfit to lead Christian armies. Frederick's response to these attacks reveals the sophisticated understanding he had developed about managing his public image. Palace records show that he began carefully orchestrating public appearances with his wife, ensuring they were seen together at state functions and religious ceremonies. He also cultivated friendships with prominent women at court, not romantic relationships, but visible associations that could counter rumors about his exclusive preference for male company. The king's inner circle became increasingly protective, developing what contemporary accounts describe as an elaborate system for screening visitors and monitoring conversations. Servants were sworn to secrecy about the king's private life, and trusted courtiers acted as intermediaries to prevent potentially damaging encounters. According to surviving memoirs from palace staff, certain rooms at Sanssouci were declared off-limits during diplomatic visits, and Frederick's personal correspondence was handled by a select group of absolutely loyal secretaries. Yet despite these precautions, the whispers persisted and grew louder. By the 1770s, Frederick's sexuality had become what modern intelligence analysts would call an open secret, widely known but never officially acknowledged. European courts operated on the understanding that the Prussian king was homosexual, while maintaining the fiction that such discussions were merely malicious gossip. The psychological pressure of living under this constant scrutiny was taking its toll on Frederick's health and sanity, and soon, the weight of a lifetime spent hiding his true nature would drive him into an isolation so complete that even his closest friends would struggle to reach him. As Frederick II entered his final decades, the vibrant intellectual salons of Sanssouci gradually emptied. Voltaire had departed after their bitter falling out in 1753. Algarotti died in 1764, taking with him Frederick's most passionate correspondence. One by one, the brilliant men who had populated Frederick's carefully constructed sanctuary were claimed by death, exile, or estrangement. By the 1770s, the king who had once surrounded himself with Europe's greatest minds found himself increasingly alone with his thoughts, his regrets, and his secrets. Palace staff during this period documented a dramatic change in Frederick's daily routine. According to surviving accounts from his personal valet, the king would spend entire days in his private study, writing obsessively. Visitors reported finding him at his desk before dawn, still scribbling by candlelight well past midnight. What he was writing would become some of the most psychologically revealing documents in royal history. Philosophical treatises that read like confessions of a man finally confronting the cost of a lifetime spent hiding his true nature. Frederick's later philosophical works, particularly his essay on the forms of government and on the duties of sovereigns, contain passages that historians now interpret as veiled autobiographical reflections. He wrote extensively about the masks that rulers must wear, the terrible solitude of power, and the price of sacrificing personal happiness for public duty. Modern scholars analyzing these texts note that Frederick's language becomes increasingly preoccupied with themes of isolation, deception, and the corruption of authentic human relationships by political necessity. The most revealing insights come from Frederick's private correspondence during his final years. Letters to his few remaining friends, preserved in the Berlin State Library, show a man consumed by regret and philosophical despair. He wrote about feeling like an actor who has forgotten his true face beneath the mask, and described his life as a performance that has outlasted its audience. According to experts in 18th century literature, this language suggests someone grappling with what we might now recognize as identity dissociation, the psychological fracture that results from decades of suppressing one's authentic self. Frederick's relationship with his own legacy became increasingly complex during this period. Court records show that he began obsessively editing his memoirs, destroying personal letters, and carefully controlling what documentation would survive after his death. Some historians suggest that this represented Frederick's final attempt to curate the historical record, ensuring that future generations would remember him as a military genius and philosophical king, rather than as the tortured, closeted man he knew himself to be. The isolation took a severe toll on Frederick's physical and mental health. Physicians' reports from the 1780s describe a king suffering from what appears to be chronic depression, insomnia, and increasing paranoia. He trusted fewer and fewer people, ate irregularly, and showed little interest in the governmental duties that had once energized him. Palace servants noted that he would sometimes sit for hours staring out windows, seemingly lost in memories of a past that could never be recovered. Yet even in his darkest moments, Frederick continued writing letters, philosophical essays, poetry, as if words were the only remaining connection to the emotional life he had been forced to abandon. These final writings would become his most honest legacy, documents that revealed the true cost of royal power when it demands the sacrifice of love itself. But time was running out for the king's confessions, and soon Prussia would face the challenge of burying not just a monarch, but the dangerous secrets he carried to his grave. On August 17, 1786, Frederick II of Prussia died alone in his study at Sanssouci Palace. The man who had commanded Europe's most feared armies, built one of the continent's most brilliant courts, and hidden one of history's most dangerous royal secrets, finally surrendered to the isolation that had consumed his final years. According to his personal physician's records, Frederick's last words were spoken in French. La montagne est passée, nous irons mieux. The mountain is crossed, we shall go better. But the mountain Frederick had crossed was not just death. It was a lifetime of concealment that was about to be exposed in the most unexpected way. The immediate aftermath of Frederick's death revealed the extraordinary measures he had taken to control his legacy. Palace staff discovered that the king had spent his final months systematically destroying personal correspondence and private documents. Rooms that had once overflowed with letters from European intellectuals were found nearly empty, their contents apparently fed to fires over many nights. Frederick's personal secretary reported that the king had given explicit instructions about which papers should be preserved and which should disappear forever. Yet despite Frederick's efforts, enough survived to paint a devastating portrait of his hidden emotional life. The royal archives, opened after the fall of the Prussian monarchy, contained fragments of his most intimate correspondence. Letters to Algarotti, preserved because they existed in Italian archives beyond Frederick's control, revealed the passionate intensity of his feelings for other men. Draft poems found in his private study explored themes of forbidden love and impossible desire. Court records documented his careful choreography of public appearances, designed to mask his true nature. Modern historians, armed with access to these previously sealed documents and applying contemporary understanding of sexuality and psychology, have reached conclusions that would have horrified 18th century European courts. Leading Frederick scholars now interpret his lifelong bachelorhood, his passionate male friendships, his coded correspondence, and his documented aversion to physical intimacy with women as clear evidence of homosexuality. The consensus among serious historians is that Frederick II was almost certainly gay, making him one of the most powerful closeted figures in European history. The tragic irony of Frederick's story becomes clear when viewed through a modern lens. The very characteristics that made him different, his sensitivity, his intellectual curiosity, his appreciation for beauty and art, were precisely the qualities that made him one of history's most effective rulers. His ability to think differently, to approach problems from unexpected angles, to see patterns that eluded more conventional minds, may have been directly connected to his experience as someone living outside society's accepted norms. Frederick's legacy forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about power, authenticity, and the price of keeping secrets. How many brilliant minds has history lost to the crushing weight of societal expectations? How many leaders have been weakened by the energy required to maintain false identities? Frederick II achieved greatness despite the enormous psychological burden of hiding his true nature. But what might he have accomplished if he had been free to love openly? The story of the gay king who built an empire while hiding his heart reminds us that even the most powerful people in history were, fundamentally, human beings struggling with the same needs for love, acceptance, and authentic connection that drive us all. If Frederick's story has moved you, if it's made you think differently about the hidden costs of power and the courage required to live authentically, please subscribe to our channel. There are so many more forbidden histories waiting to be told, so many secrets still buried in palace archives. Together, we can uncover the human stories behind the crowns and discover the truth about the people who shaped our world.